Right. So this week's talk is going to be on whole foods versus ultra processed foods and which is best for weight loss. So you've probably heard the terms whole foods, processed foods, and ultra processed foods being chucked around, but you're probably not quite exactly sure what the definition of each one is and where the crossover occurs. So I'm going to explain each one of them for you. So first up, what are whole foods? Whole foods are typically minimally processed and they've come either from the ground or from an animal. They've been picked, grown, and they essentially, when you buy them, they are very much in the form that they grew in nature, or whether they've been cut from an animal, it's still a whole piece of meat or a whole fruit or veg, whole bean, nut, fish, you name it, it's still kind of in one piece. Typically, they are found around the outside of a supermarket and they will be either loose or in clear packaging that is unbranded. Next up, we'll look at processed foods. So these are generally made from whole foods, but they've typically gone through some kind of process to alter their state to make them a bit more palatable, slightly more appealing, but they're still pretty good for you in general. Examples of this would be good quality bread from a bakery, pasta, good quality hummus, oats, yogurt, peanut butter, all really good stuff made from whole foods. Yeah, so just because it's processed doesn't mean it's bad. Next up, we're going to look at ultra processed foods, which kind of show the difference between processed and ultra processed. There's a big difference. So ultra processed foods, these are typically contain some amount of whole foods, but they've been massively altered by the manufacturer with a large amount of ingredients that don't occur naturally, including artificial sweeteners, flavors, emulsifiers, stabilizers, preservatives. Typically, they contain very high amounts of sugar and fat. You will typically see them in bright packaging because they're more marketable to consumers by manufacturers in this way. Okay, so now we're going to look at kind of how whole foods have been in existence for a long period of time and how our bodies have kind of come to be able to deal with them. So humans as a species have evolved over millions of years from being fish to growing out. And as a result of that, we've always consumed whole foods because that's all that we've had available to us. And again, because of that, our bodies have become adept at processing this kind of food and being able to extract the nutrients from it and survive off it very well. It's essentially like, imagine whole foods is a language and that language is English. And the body is very good at communicating in English. It can read it, it can write it, it can speak it, it can communicate in it. So because it's had those years to essentially become fluent in that language. However, since the 1960s, big food manufacturers realized that whole foods are not very marketable because everybody has access to the same supply of meats, fruits, fish, veg, etc. So it's very difficult for them to differentiate themselves in a market selling the exact same food that everybody else is selling. So what did they do? They started altering the products to make them more saleable and appealable to the general public. They created products that were unique to their company so that they could say, oh, we've got this one product, this is the price for it, nobody else can offer you this product. It's typically just basic economics, basic marketing. Examples of these products include Mars bars, pot noodles, Coca-Cola. They're typically very unnaturally sweet, very unnaturally salty. They'll typically come in very bright packaging to appeal to the consumer, and they'll have a lot of money behind it to advertise it. So for example, think of the Coca-Cola advert with Father Christmas. They managed to almost monopolize the entire Christmas scene just with one advert because of the amount of money that they put behind it. I think the Coca-Cola bottle shape is factored around a woman's body. And that was invented that way to kind of make it more saleable and make it more appealing to the masses. And another thing is these foods are typically made as cheaply as possible because they're a business. They need to be made as cheap as possible, sold the most amount of money to make the business the most amount of profit. So here's what they did to essentially make these products as appealing as possible. They realized that our brains still work like they did thousands and thousands of years ago, where food was scarce and we simply didn't know where our next meal was coming from. There was no guarantee we were going to get to feed again. So if you think about it like this, imagine being a beggar on the streets without a penny to your name. You're always on the lookout for pence, 5p's, 10p's here and there that you can get hold of, buy yourself a little bit of food, and just keep on looking for more little bits of money. However, occasionally you'll find a £20 note. And that feels absolutely amazing because it's like weeks and weeks and weeks worth of change that you found on the floor in one go. So you know when you find that, you get a real good feeling. Yes, this is amazing. We're not going to starve for at least 2 weeks. We've got this food that we can survive off. Brilliant. And that is kind of the same effect that ultra-processed food has on our brain because it's made so high energy dense, so overly sweet, so overly salty, vibrant, appealing packaging. When our brains see it, they go into that state of like, oh my God, I need that. We need our brain tells us that we need that because it's going to sustain us. The reality is we don't. It's just we're being tricked into buying it. And the issue is that not only are those foods in creation, they're everywhere that you go. So if you go to pretty much any shop, every street corner, in a newsagent, I mean, you can't even fill your car up nowadays without being absolutely bombarded with a huge array of ultra-processed foods. So it's very difficult to get away from them and not consume them. So there's never really been a harder time to lose weight. There's more ultra-processed food around than ever before. However, if you can understand how the industry works, there are steps you can take to avoid it and how you can concentrate on whole foods and making your weight loss journey easy for yourself. So what is the best way of removing ultra-processed food from your diet? Break it down, one meal at a time. Start with breakfast. Stop eating cereals, stop eating toast, stop eating bagels, and stop skipping breakfast. I mean, that's not ultra-processed, but it's not recommended. And concentrate on things like porridge, eggs, fruit, natural yogurts. These are far better for you. Your body's far better at processing them, and they're not absolutely rammed with artificial flavors, sweeteners, emulsifiers. They're not going to make you fat, basically, because your body knows how to shut off the hunger signal when it starts putting those foods in. Because it's, let's say there's like 20% sugar in an ultra-processed food breakfast. A whole food breakfast might only have 5% sugar. So when you've eaten the same amount of food, you're getting far less calories from the whole foods than you are getting from the ultra-processed foods. So whole foods, better for calories. You also need to reduce the amount of times that you need to go shopping by planning your meals and cooking whole foods and taking it with you to work, having it ready for when you get home from work. Because if you're giving yourself decisions to make when you're hungry in regards to your diet, your body is going to want the takeaway. It's going to want the pizza. It's going to want the KFC, the McDonald's. It's not going to want the chicken salad, the tuna jacket potato that you've made that you could have, because it's like, right, we're hungry. We need something fast acting now with loads of calories. But if you've already made that food, you don't have to make that decision. That decision's already been made for you. Then you can stay on track with your calories, stay on track with your diet. And a good trick is once you start removing ultra-processed food from your diet, you stop craving it as much. You've broken the habit of consuming those foods all the time. And you will kind of not forget, but you will find it easier to not eat them because it's not part of your daily routine. And the recommended amount of whole foods that you should have in your diet is 80%. This is a level that's recommended by dietitians and nutritionists who recognize that if you eat 80% whole foods, you can get the majority of the nutrients that you need from those foods to kind of live prosperously, but without it being too restrictive on your diet. So if you are eating 20% 20% UPF around that or less, it's not ideal. 100% would be ideal for UPF for whole foods, but 20% is a more manageable, more achievable target for most people in the modern world.